Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today we are taking a look at the Sovereign Battle Group set for Armoured Clash, which was kindly sent to me by Warcradle Studios for review. This is a typical sort of medium-sized box set that of course comes shrink-wrapped, but I always take that one off ahead of the review, and comes with a classic sleeve on it that you can slide off to check out what the contents inside the box is. Inside of the box we find the pamphlet for Armoured Clash, which has a QR code on it which will lead you to the build instructions for this set and any other information about Armoured Clash, and it does so for Dystopian Wars as well on the other side. Apart from this pamphlet, we also find two sprues for bases. You will need these to make the cavalry models found on the plastic sprues, but also the dragoons as well. And there are tiny little flags on them too, which sort of slot into that tiny little hole to denote the officer model of each of your units, so you know which is the most important model to protect, so your unit doesn't become disordered. On top of that, we also have two bags of resin, one massive bag containing the landship, but it's kind of neat that they've also included this little thing, which seems to be a small sprue with two resin riflemen in there. The one bit of criticism that was there about the rifleman or the infantry sprue was that there was a lack of two riflemen in case you didn't want to make a command sprue, so they've included them in this box, and from what I've been told they are also going to be included in any of the introductory sets as well, so that little annoyance has been fixed. You do not get any infantry sprues on this, or in this box rather. You get two of the armored sprues, the heavy sprues that come in there. These heavy sprues are identical, there's two of them, and they will build some of your tanks, but you will not be able to make every bit of variant to the tank that you want, because you will need to use some parts on your big landship. The main part that is used are the little turrets that are on there, and you will need to use the turrets that are found on the Galahad main battle tank. So you will not be able to construct two Galahad main battle tanks out of this set, and you will instead have to make the Breacher variant, or you can make the Tristan Armored Transport if you want, which uses the other type of turret, because these, well, they will go on your landship. Speaking of the landship, this one is of course the star of the show for this box, so let's see what is inside. Inside of it you will find that the tank is mostly made up of a single big chunk of resin that you'll find, which is completely flat at the bottom because the tracks sit there, and I actually like that simply because I always drill magnets in the bottom of my big models so you can transport them more easily, and so that's pretty easy. Apart from other bits that will need to be glued on, there's 4 holes on them for the turrets that I've mentioned before, and there is a large bit of an opening on the top that will take either a dome to create the monarch, or the sovereign if you want to take the artillery bit. The neat bit about this main hull is that it is also a one cast mold, so there's hardly any mold lines for you to clean off of the main resin part. The two other big turrets that go on there can be found here. Of course the barrels will still need to be glued on to the artillery piece, and yeah, this is the way you can assemble the Monarch version, if I'm not mistaken. It's also pretty easy to magnetize. All you have to do is install a magnet into the main hull. I recommend you install a 5mm magnet and then a 4mm magnet into one of the other two top bits. The reason why I make it slightly different is because then you always have a bit of wiggle room in case you do not manage to get it dead center. And the only other sprue is this one. It did have a bit of flashing. There's two balconies on there. They go onto the side, and as far as I can tell you can't really get them wrong, and you'll also need to install the smokestacks on the top there. I believe the longest smokestacks are pointed towards the inside of the ship, so that's nice and easy. And then there are two big gun barrels. It's a heavy weapon attack that can be glued to the front of your resin hull. The other 4 barrels are actually the artillery barrels that are used on the Sovereign landship that you will need to glue down with some super glues. These are not, of course, one-part molds, so there is a bit of cleanup of mold lines and flash, but that's always straightforward to do. You just have to scrape your craft knife along the sides of it, and it'll come off rather easily because it is resin after all. Speaking of, if you have a hard time getting your clippers through those big sprue gates, make sure that you heat up the resin slightly. It'll cut through it like a hot knife through butter. Anyway, this is me having assembled the model, and like I said, I just installed a magnet into the center of it, a 5mm magnet in the bottom, or the middle part rather, and then 4mm in the optional parts so that it slides together rather easily. And this is a big chunky ship. If you have to compare it to one of the Resin flagships from Dystopian Wars that you might be familiar with, I for instance got out my König ship, well, that's roughly what you get. It's at least twice as wide, although it's a bit shorter as well in terms of length, but when you're talking about the sheer volume of resin that you're getting on this new Sovereign and Monarch model, it is an absolute beast of a unit. Now, if you're unsure which variant you want to field on the play table, make sure you check out my video. I recently did a deep dive on the Crown Orbat, which tells you all the different pros and cons of each variant. And if you're looking for more info about Armoured Clash, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Not a lot of work remains on this model. All I have to do is install the turrets, but I like to paint those separately on bits of the sprues, like I've explained in my painting videos, so that I have a bit of an easier time painting up this model. Apart from that, you also get the armoured sprues, and I have already painted up some of these. These are the Galahad main battle tanks, and as you can see, they use the machine gun turrets on the side. You will not be able to make this variant. If you want to see how big these models are, by the way, I've got a very ubiquitous model, a skeleton from Games Workshop, to sort of compare to that. And yeah, these smaller tanks, these size 1 tanks, are definitely quite chunky models, and yeah, you can have some smaller bits as well on there with some crew members, for instance on the artillery pieces. I do highly recommend that you paint those in sub-assemblies, because there are quite a few parts that you have to glue together to make these things. This is a Mordred artillery piece. I absolutely love the detail on the crew. The guy covering up his ears is just absolutely brilliant, and the one with the binoculars peeking out over the gun shield, that's just, yeah, it brings the models to life. But you will be using some sub-assemblies to do this. And how do I transport these models? Well, I simply glue a 5x1mm magnet at the bottom, and then use a couple of extra magnets to be able to stick it to a metal sheet, and that makes it nice and easy to transport. As far as the other units that you can make with these sprues, you have the Dragoons. These Dragoons come in 2 variants. There is the more anti-air and shooting based heavy Dragoon that comes with shields, which is how I've assembled my models from the Battle for Singapore starter set, a video that you can also find on the channel, so definitely check that one out. For ease of transport, these are very easy. A 5mm by 1mm magnet at the bottom makes sure that you can transport it rather easily. And here we have it compared to the Skeleton Warrior again. Of course, these models are slightly smaller, it's 10mm scale, but overall it's not that much smaller. I did go ahead and be a bit crazy about it and include a tartan. Do not recommend unless you really want to get hand cramps. Finally, the last unit that I have not yet assembled are the Cavalry. Each horse comes with 2 pieces that you have to glue together, and then you will have to glue them into the base, along with one of those round parts to cover up the holes that you will not be using on it. You can make 5 infantry out of this one, rather cavalry, so you've actually got quite a few bases to spare, which is quite handy, because if you want to make alternate versions of commanders and everything, if you buy this set, you will actually have some of these bases to use for that purpose. And there we have it. That is pretty much what you can make with this new Sovereign box. I will be painting this one up in the same khaki drill scheme that I've used for the Crown. It is a massive model though, so I will be adding a few extra steps instead of just stippling it on there to create some sub-shading with a dark brown. Anyway, keep your eyes on the horizon for when that little video drops. I'll first be going over the Loashan battle group, which I've also received, and I do hope to see you in that next review. Until then, bye!